The lake was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that makes a person believe the world is still capable of peace. Mist drifted over the water like slow-moving silver ghosts, and the wooden planks of my dock were still wet from dawn. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee in my hand, expecting nothing more than that familiar breath of cold air, but what I saw instead froze me mid-sip. Strangers. 3 of them. Feet in my water. Chairs on my shore. Fishing lines cast from my dock. At first, I thought maybe they were lost. Maybe they wandered too far past the public access on the other side of the lake. But then I saw the coolers, the portable grill, and a woman lounging like she owned the place. It wasn't confusion. It was invasion. My jaw tightened. I walked closer, boots pressing into the wet soil. "Morning," I said, voice flat. "You all realize this is private property, right?" The woman in the oversized sun hat didn't even turn her head. "The HOA said this lakefront is common property. We're allowed to use it." HOA. Of course. That single word had been a thorn in my life since the day I moved here. I bought this land because of the lake, because my grandfather's deed said the shoreline and dock belonged to our family for as long as the water touched it. Long before any HOA existed. But ever since they discovered my waterfront access, they've been trying to force me to share it. I took a breath slow enough to keep from shaking. "The HOA doesn't own this section of shoreline," I said. "Pack up." That got her attention. She stood up, sunglasses sliding down her nose as she smirked. "Listen, sweetheart, the board already voted. This is a community lakefront. You can't gatekeep nature." "Sweetheart. Gatekeep. A woman trespassing on my dock telling me what I could not do." I didn't smile. "Show me your document. Something in writing that says you can be here." She lifted her phone like a sword. "I don't need paper. The president said it in the meeting. That's enough authority." The others laughed, like it was funny, like I was the stranger, and they were the owners. The kind of laugh that burrows into memory like a splinter. I didn't argue further. I simply took out my own phone, snapped photos, faces, chairs, license plates, everything. The sun hat woman's laughter stopped. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped. "Collecting evidence," I said, calm now, quiet now, the way a storm becomes right before lightning hits. "Trespassing is a crime." Just then, I heard footsteps behind me and the familiar fake sweet tone of the world's most unwanted morning visitor. Vivian Holt, HOA president. She brushed past me like I wasn't even there. "Don't bother him," she told the trespassers. "He's new to how things work here." New. I'd lived on this land longer than the roofs over their heads had even existed. Vivian turned to me with a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "This lake has always been common access. You were informed." "No," I said. "I was targeted." Her lips twitched. Maybe anger, maybe fear. Hard to tell. But I knew something now, this wasn't confusion. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was strategy. They wanted my shoreline, my dock, my lake, and they believed they could take it. I looked out over the water, my grandfather's water, and something in me hardened. They thought this was over. That I would complain, maybe threaten, maybe file a letter and eventually give up. They were wrong. Because that morning was the moment I decided something I had never imagined I would need to decide. If the HOA wanted a battle for this lake, I would build a wall they could never cross. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, no, fear had burned out of me long ago, but because I could still hear their laughter. It didn't matter that the shoreline was empty now or that the moon had replaced the morning mist. Their presence lingered like muddy footprints on my mind, and by the time the sun returned, I had already made my decision. If the HOA wanted a war, I needed ammunition. Real ammunition. Legal, historical, undeniable. So, I went to the one place nobody from this neighborhood had ever bothered to look, my grandfather's storage room, the one built beneath the old boathouse long before the HOA even existed. The floorboards creaked as I stepped inside, dust swirling up from the darkness. The air smelled like oil, old rope, and wood soaked in lake water. A place that had seen storms far more dangerous than paperwork and entitled neighbors. I opened crate after crate, searching for what I knew had to exist, something I had only heard stories about as a kid. My grandfather had been a stubborn man, the kind of man who believed in defending what was his with more than just a signature. And if he had fought for this shoreline before, then proof was somewhere in this room. I found it buried beneath rusted tools and a folded tarp, a long, weathered binder marked with a name and a date. Harlan J. Mercer, 1954. My grandfather's signature. Something in me shifted. Pages crackled as I turned them, the paper thin as winter leaves. At first, it was just maps, old survey lines, sketches of the lake, faded photographs showing how small the neighborhood used to be. But then I saw it. A deed, stamped and sealed, declaring ownership of the shoreline, dock rights, and a 27-foot stretch of water access belonging to the Mercer family for perpetuity. That word hit me like iron. Perpetuity. Not lease. Not temporary. Not shared, permanent. There was more. Folded inside the deed was a letter addressed to the county registrar, dated the same year. It warned that any future development, community association, or governing body attempting to claim access without written consent would be in violation of private property law. My grandfather had predicted this. Decades before any of them existed, he knew someone would try. I took photos of everything, page after page, making sure every word was digitized. Then I closed the binder, holding it for a moment like a shield. Because that's what it was. When I stepped outside, the wind was different. The lake looked different. The ground beneath my feet felt like it had a voice again, and it was saying, "Take it back." I didn't waste time. I drove straight to the county records office, binder beside me on the seat. The clerk, a man with a tired face and thick glasses, studied the document, flipping through slowly until his eyes widened. "This," he murmured, tapping the deed, "supersedes any HOA charter filed after it. If this is real, they cannot claim your shoreline." "It's real," I said. "I just need certified copies." He nodded, and as he worked, something strange happened. The exhaustion in his face faded, replaced by something like satisfaction. As if he had seen this fight before, many times, and finally someone brought fire instead of surrender. When I left, I didn't just carry paper. I carried history. Proof. Power. And I knew exactly where I was going, the HOA office. Vivian's car was parked outside, red and polished like a warning. I walked past it and stepped into the meeting room where she sat with 3 board members. They looked up, annoyed, until they saw the binder. I placed the deed on the table. "Your guests were trespassing," I said quietly. "And this proves it." Vivian reached for the pages, but I didn't let go. "Not yet. There's more," I continued. "Starting today, the shoreline is closed. Permanently. You come near my dock again, and the next people you see won't be me." I leaned forward. "It'll be law enforcement." No one spoke. I walked out, letting silence finish the conversation. But deep down, I knew silence wouldn't last. I had just cornered the HOA. And cornered things don't surrender. They attack. The next 48 hours were quiet, too quiet, in the way a forest goes silent before a predator appears. No laughter echoed from my shoreline, no strangers dragged coolers across my grass, and Vivian didn't darken my driveway with her HOA smile sharpened into a blade. It felt like victory, but I had lived long enough to know better. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. On the 3rd morning, I heard engines. Not one. Several. I stepped onto the porch and saw them, trucks lined along the narrow road, tailgates dropping, voices carrying tents, kayaks, a portable speaker. At least a dozen people, none of them residents. Outsiders. Invited guests. The kind meant to overwhelm, to prove a point, to make a statement bigger than the truth. And there she was, Vivian Holt, HOA president, red jacket zipped high, clipboard in hand like a general surveying her battlefield. I walked down to the gate, the deed in my pocket. Vivian smiled, the kind of smile people wear right before they try to take something that isn't theirs. "You're early," I said. "We're exercising community lake rights," she replied. "These are official HOA guests." My jaw tightened. This isn't community lakefront. The deed is clear. Vivian stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You think that paper scares me? I have 30 signatures saying the shoreline belongs to everyone. Your deed is old, people change. Decisions change. Law doesn't," I said. She blinked, but not in fear. In calculation. Behind us, someone cranked the speaker. Music exploded through the air, loud, intentional, drowning out reason. People cheered. A man dragged a kayak across my grass, metal scraping stone. Another hammered a pole into the sand to tie a canopy. I felt something inside me go cold. Not angry. Not shocked. Resolved. I took my phone out, filmed everything, timestamp running across the screen like a witness. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "You really want to go down this road?" "You walked onto it," I replied. "I'm just paving it." Her lips curled. "Fine." She signaled to a man near the trucks, and moments later the wail of sirens cut through the air. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up, gravel snapping beneath its tires. The officer stepped out, adjusting his belt, gaze bouncing between me and the shoreline party. Vivian pounced. "Officer, he's preventing homeowners and their approved guests from accessing shared lake property." The officer turned to me. "Sir, is that true?" I pulled out the deed, handing him a certified copy. "Private shoreline. Private dock. Trespassers." He read the first page. Then the second. His brows pulled together. "This is a perpetual property deed," he said, gaze shifting to Vivian. "It predates any HOA charter." Vivian stepped forward. "That deed is ancient. It can't possibly." "It can," the officer cut in. "And it does." The look on Vivian's face cracked, just for a moment, before she reassembled it. The officer faced the crowd. "Everyone not invited by the legal property owner needs to leave. Now." Boos. Complaints. Someone shouted that I hated the community. That I was selfish. That I didn't deserve lakefront property if I wouldn't share it. But slowly, they left. Vivian was the last to move. She stopped inches from me. "You think you won? This isn't over." "It will be soon," I said. "Very soon." Because while they shouted and trespassed and tried to bury history beneath arrogance, I had spent the last night doing something far more useful. I had met with a contractor. A specialist. A man who built barrier fences for government properties, the kind designed not to be moved, not to be cut, not to be climbed. I had the plans. I had the permit. I had the materials scheduled. And I had a new promise inside my chest. They will never set foot on my shoreline again. They thought it was over after the deputies cleared my shoreline. They thought they had intimidated me, delayed me, scared me into backing down or negotiating. But they didn't understand the truth yet, not really. They were fighting for an entitled idea of community. I was fighting for blood inheritance, written in a deed older than any of their houses, older even than the roads that led to them. And men who inherit burdens do not surrender them. The construction began at dawn 2 days later. The contractor, a broad-shouldered man named Carson, arrived with 3 trucks and a quiet confidence forged from building fences around government fuel depots and restricted land. He didn't speak much, he didn't need to. The steel posts he unloaded spoke for him, thick, dark, coated to resist cutting, rust, and time itself. The fence would run along the shoreline and down into the lake bed, sealed with concrete and stone so no one could swim around, climb through, or force their way past. By the time the first post was drilled into the ground, HOA cars lined the road like spectators at a public execution. Vivian arrived late, stepping out of her SUV with a stack of papers, fury circling her like a storm she could barely command. The moment she saw the drilling rigs, she marched down the slope, heels sinking into the earth. "This construction violates HOA landscaping standards," she snapped at me. "This land," I said, "doesn't belong to the HOA." She shoved the papers toward me. "Cease and desist. Effective immediately." Carson didn't stop drilling. The sound drowned out her voice, and something in her expression cracked again, like that day by the water, when the officer said the deed was real. Her authority wasn't used to being ignored. When the machinery paused, Carson asked quietly, "You want me to stop for her?" "No," I said. "Keep going." Vivian's eyes widened, and I saw the moment she realized that paper and clipboard power doesn't stand a chance against a steel post bolted into the earth. She dialed her phone. I already knew who she was calling. The sheriff returned, same officer, same cautious look. "We're doing this again," he asked. "Arrest him," Vivian demanded. "He's violating association orders." The officer exhaled, then looked at me. "Do you have the permit?" I handed it to him, stamped and signed by the county. His answer was simple. "They're within their rights, ma'am." Vivian's voice rose. "This is a neighborhood. A community. This," I said, pointing to the earth beneath my boots, "is my land." She didn't argue. Not this time. She left without another word, board members trailing her like silent, obedient shadows. But I knew that silence was temporary. It returned that night. Carson and his crew had gone home, leaving the equipment locked behind temporary fencing. I sat on the porch, listening to the lake breathe. That's when I heard it, the snap of metal, the clatter of tools being moved, hushed whispers. I stepped quietly toward the shore. 2 figures crouched by the worksite, one holding bolt cutters, the other digging near the concrete supports. Sabotage. Branches cracked beneath my boots, and one of them spun around. For a moment our eyes locked, his full of fear, mine full of something far older. They ran. Tripped. Scrambled up the slope. I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. I had seen enough to know, they weren't just fighting me. They were desperate now. The next morning, I filed a police report and installed floodlights and cameras. Carson reinforced the supports, thicker steel, deeper anchors. "You're not just building a fence," he said. "You're building a border." "No," I replied. "I'm building a line they never should have crossed." By the time the last panel went up, the lakefront was quiet again. No laughter. No crowds. No strangers dragging kayaks across my grass. Just the sound of water striking a barrier they would never pass. But I knew the HOA wasn't finished. And I was right. 3 days later, I received a certified letter demanding immediate removal of the fence, or they would take me to court for restricting communal access. I didn't tear it up. I smiled. Because now the fight would move to a place where entitlement couldn't shout over facts. And I already knew how the story would end. The court date arrived on a crisp morning, the kind that makes people dress sharper than their own confidence. Vivian Holt and her board showed up, faces painted with forced determination, clutching folders and community rights like weapons. I arrived with the binder, the certified deed, and a quiet certainty that felt heavier than steel. The courtroom smelled like varnish and tension, a place where entitlement met law, and law was patient, immutable, and merciless. Vivian started her argument first, voice polished, rehearsed. She spoke of shared resources, community benefit, and good faith obligations, all the buzzwords HOA presidents use when they forget morality, history, and reality. I listened, calm. Then it was my turn. I placed the deed on the table, every page visible, every signature undeniable. I told the story of the lake, the dock, the trespassers, and the HOA's relentless attempts to claim what wasn't theirs. I told the story of the fence, the sabotage, the intimidation, and the evidence collected, photographs, timestamps, police reports. Every detail I delivered with a voice steady and precise, each word hitting like a hammer on a nail driven into truth. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes and no patience for arrogance, leaned forward. Vivian opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. Show me where the law permits the HOA to override a private deed. Vivian faltered. Her confidence cracked like thin ice. The board shuffled papers, muttering excuses, searching for any loophole, any argument, any shred of claim. But the law was clear, and my grandfather's foresight was sharper than any loophole they could manufacture. Hours passed. Testimonies, objections, clarifications. Every attempt to bend reality in their favor fell apart under scrutiny. The HOA's narrative of common property crumbled like dry leaves underfoot. Witnesses confirmed my ownership. The certified deed, the county records, the historical photographs, each was a brick in the fortress of truth I had built over the past weeks. Finally, the judge leaned back, fingers steepled. The evidence is irrefutable. The shoreline, the dock, and lake access belong to the plaintiff. The HOA has no claim. The fence may remain. Trespassers must be removed immediately. Costs to the HOA. Silence filled the room. Then, Vivian's mouth opened, then closed. Her board members looked like children caught stealing candy in the dark. They had tried to bend reality, to override history, to challenge law itself, but they had failed. As the courtroom emptied, I walked out into the late afternoon sun. The lake shimmered, calm once more. My dock, my water, my land. The fence stood tall, a monument not just of steel and concrete, but of patience, strategy, and unwavering will. I sipped coffee on my porch, watching the water ripple against the posts. The neighborhood had learned something crucial: power doesn't always come from loud voices, signatures, or threats. Power comes from knowing your ground, defending it, and letting truth be louder than entitlement. Vivian never approached me again. Her HOA eventually dissolved under internal conflict and public scrutiny. The guests who once paraded across my property knew better, and the shoreline returned to its rightful owner, me. The lake no longer whispered threats. It whispered history, loyalty, and the quiet satisfaction of justice served. And as I stood there, looking across the water, I realized something profound: revenge is fleeting, but rightful action, true justice, lasts. Every fence post, every photograph, every legal page was a testament not just to possession, but to principle. Because sometimes, the people who think they can take what isn't theirs don't just underestimate you. They forget that the ground beneath them belongs to someone who remembers. And on that lake, on that dock, under that fence, I remembered.